I had to give y'all that introduction. I had to tease y'all just a bit. But see, when you see the images and then you see the two animals running, without a doubt you get exactly where I'm going with this story in this fairy tale series, which I'm still grateful to Mr. Burns for giving me this idea. Just the music in the beginning alone tells you what this is going to be about, because most people alive grew up on some variation of this story growing up, even if you lived in the 1990s. I'll even go as far, though I could be incorrect, as saying kids in the early 2000s parents were probably telling them this story. Most of the time it's attributed to Aesop, but you can find variations of this story throughout antiquity, I think up into the medieval times and well up into modern times. I'll let y'all do all that research. That's just going to be a lot for me. The tortoise and the hare. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown. A hare runs into a tortoise and ridicules the tortoise for being a tortoise. Basically, the tortoise is too slow. So the tortoise is like, I'll challenge you to a race. So the race goes. As you know, the hare knows he's going to win or think he's going to win. So he gets arrogant and sleeps. And by the time he gets to the finish line and he's hightailing it, it's too late because the tortoise is already crossed. And the moral of this story is steady wins the race, meaning if you do something in slow pace, it will in time pay off. But let me introduce you to a new element to this story. Let me retell it and tell you why in this fairy tale series it's ruining adults today and why you're living a fairy tale. So a hare runs into a tortoise, and tells the tortoise is slow. The tortoise challenges it to a race, but this time a fox decides that it wants to regulate the race. There's not much variation about why the fox regulates, but in the end it's the same ending, right? So I'm making this quick. The tortoise still makes it before the hare. Why is it that fox is added in some variations? You think this little animal's cute, right? But we all know the nature of a fox in symbology. It's cunning, tricky, and calculated and swift nature. So why would the fox ask to be mediator? Now, if you want to read this story for free, variation of it instead of buying it, the shortened version is on Library of Congress, okay? Because if you just read it there, it's got Aesop's fables. But that part of the fable doesn't say why. So let me play into the modern day person's reason why the fox was added in between these two animals. See, when I was a kid, this story just definitely didn't make sense. A rabbit in a real race could outdo any kind of tortoise type animal by leaps and bounds. So it just didn't make sense to me, except the fact that I thought the darn hare or the rabbit was being arrogant, which at the time I just thought as a kid was mean. Why did they add a fox in between these two? See, I think the fox being in the middle because it's cunning represents trying to stop you in your tracks, trying to interfere in something it has no business, right? And what I mean by this is the fox, to me, in my opinion, represents the things the obstacles, the cunning, the trickery that people use when they need to help get in your way to stop your goal. Because you know how sometimes, like when I got my master's in 2022, that thing I started in 2016 and didn't finish till 2022. That was a while. So you can say that my masters was the tortoise. The hare was the representation of me saying I want this over with and sometimes rushing through things and not doing my best. The fox represents the cunning, the agging on of something. Because ideally, in nature, the tortoise would be inferior to these two animals. So why add the fox to the story? It just doesn't make sense. Unless that fox represents what we all know, the distraction in the form of delayed gratification. That's what I think that fox represents. If you go and you look up the symbology of a fox, it'll tell you that a fox represents that very thing. You having conflicting interest in being conflicted about something, and that those conflicts will continue to arise in life unless you deal with them. Because just with the tortoise and the hare and the regular story by itself, it makes perfectly good sense that the hare got arrogant, slept, and by the time he made it to the finish line, he lost. The hare would have no reason for delayed gratification unless something else, ideally that fox, slipped in and played unnecessary mediator. That fox is that in between. You know when you need to be that tortoise and take your time, but you want to be that hare and rest because you figure you're young. See, that hare for real represents you in your teens and 20s when you're trying to figure yourself out. That fox is what slows you down. That tortoise represents you when you're patient, no matter when you start to build something. But when you know you're building towards it, you build slow and steady so that you can enjoy it in the end. Because that's if we take into account the story, the tortoise is the one that challenged the hare to the race. Which means the tortoise understood the hare and the fox's nature. And sometimes when you're trying to rise to the top, it's best to be the tortoise. And the reason it's best to move slow and steady instead of being cunning and being arrogant is because slow and steady earns you the most respect. So get out of your fairy tale that things come easy in life when they don't.